All right. Well, good morning to everybody, and again, thanks for allowing me to come and bring some data to you. Again, this is the impact of fungicide programs and delayed harvest on yield and quality of peanut, and this is mainly looking at the effects or the indirect effects of fungicides on peg strength and pod loss, and we'll discuss that as we go through. Every year growers have a little bit of pod loss, usually anywhere from 5, maybe 10%. Some when it's pretty bad, but usually it's pretty mild from year to year. But in the last couple of years, we've had excess of 10+% of pod loss, and this is about the same time that the Miravis fungicide come out, and there was some speculation that it might help, and so that's where this project has come from. And the biggest thing is we don't want this kind of pod loss, as you can see in this image. This is significant pod loss to some degree. And most of the pod loss that we deal with are basically the results of weather throughout the season or weather at harvest that causes some of that, whether it's through disease problems or just too much moisture or various things when we try to go in and harvest that crop. Two of the things that we can help with is pest management problems. In this case, how you using the correct fungicide programs to promote plant health as much as we possibly can by controlling the diseases, but also when we harvest that crop, trying to be as timely as we can after we dig it. Those are things that growers can help to, do as in this trying to reduce the pod loss. So that's kind of what I'm going to concentrate on today and as we go through this. And so my overall objective here is, looking at things to minimize yield loss or pod loss. And it's basically to determine the efficacy of the new fungicide programs that include Miravis and their impacts on maintaining yield and quality of peanut when harvest is delayed after digging. Now, these trials were conducted in Tifton on the Ponder and Gibbs farm, and these spots are relatively low disease risk. So we are doing our best in these fungicide programs I'm going to talk about here in a minute to manage as much of the disease as we can so that we can tease out the effects of the Miravis. Our plot design was a split plot design where the main plot was a harvest date with the subplot of the fungicide program, and the year was a random effect in the analysis. So the harvest date treatments were basically on time, which for us is about 5 days after we dig them. That's about optimum, 3 to 5 in real hot years. And then letting them sit for 10 days after we dig them, and then also letting them sit till 20 days. And several of these had rain events after them. The fungicide program treatments included what we consider our bare bones, and that's number 1, chlorothalonil and chlorothalonil plus tebuconazole at these intervals that's listed there. Number 2 is basically what we're calling our 2 applications of the latest fungicide programs, filled in with Bravo Convoy in the middle, and then finished out with either at the beginning or end with chlorothalonil. And then the third fungicide program is basically the chlorothalonil, and then you got the latest plus Miravis program, which is a 2-block program spread out to 21 or 28 days. And again, treatment assessments in this case was disease incidence. Again, very light disease in this case, so we're only going to talk about what little bit of leaf spot we had. Yield, market grade, and then we also went in and recovered all the pods that were lost during digging and harvest, and we weighed those and assessed the difference among the fungicide programs. And going into the results, again, I mentioned that this was a very light disease risk field, and pretty much with the fungicide programs that we had, even at the chlorothalonil tebuconazole, we didn't have a whole lot of white mold disease in this field, so none of that was significant among the treatments. Our harvest date, again, would not have a significant disease difference because we dug them all at the same time for leaf spot or white mold. But if we look at the difference among the fungicide programs on leaf spot, we did have a significant difference between Elatus and Miravis combination compared to the chlorothalonil and Elatus, but it's still not enough to warrant any yield loss that we might have seen if we had bad disease. This is barely starting to see some defoliation, if any at all. So very light disease in this program. If you look at the yield there, even though we didn't have much disease, there was a trending up effect with the better fungicide programs. So chlorothalonil tebuconazole, again, is our base program. You can see that it made 55,063 pounds per acre. Whereas if you use Elatus or Elatus miravis, we bumped that on up above 5,400 pounds, which is pretty much what we thought. We're controlling what little diseases out there, but also maybe something there as far as also indirectly on plant health. So we just are going to try to evaluate that as we go along. If you look at harvest date, this is one also that we thought that we would see differences, and we did. If you dug on time, that was our highest yield, which was 5,700 pounds across fungicide programs because there was no significant difference there. However, if you start to look at the 10 days and 20 days after, we lost in excess of about 400 to 500 pounds. Especially at the 20-day, it was almost 600 pounds difference there between harvesting on time and being 15 days later. With that. So the fungicide programs, but also the harvest date did affect our yield overall. Now, just looking at LSKs, now this is one of those things that most of the time it's a picker or equipment setup where we're shelling peanuts out at harvest, but we also wanted to go in and see, well, does that have any effect with harvest date or fungicide? In this case, harvest date did not affect that one, at all. I thought it would have, based on the, the being brittle, a little bit more brittle at that later harvest date, but we didn't see that. If you looked at fungicide programs, though, there was a significant difference at the Elatus miravis compared to the Elatus by itself. So don't know, could this be a little bit of a, effect from the miravis there, but again, it's hard to tell at this point. Looking at the total sound mature kernels, again, the harvest date did not affect that. We were able to hold on enough pods there that it didn't affect the total sound mature kernels. But if you looked at the Elatus program, it seemed to inch out or edge out the chlorothalonil tebuconazole here, so a little bit better grade there. The Elatus miravis was in the middle, so it was the same as both programs, but there was only about a 1.1 points here, percentage points difference between the Elatus and chlorothalonil teb, so not that big of a difference in total sound mature kernels. Now, sound splits, this is one that was kind of interesting. We didn't get a fungicide difference here looking at sound splits, but when you looked at the days after digging, we did see a significant increase with sound splits from 5 days after planting, after digging, all the way up to 20 days after digging. It was about 3 percentage points between the 20 days and even the 10 days here. So that real late harvest date did affect the sound splits in that sample. So that's kind of interesting to see. When we looked at pod loss, this is the one that we were more interested in, is do we lose some of our pods due to the Elatus miravis program compared to others or not? And this is one we did have significant interaction between harvest date and fungicide program. That's why they're separated out here. But as you can see, at 5 and 10 days, the fungicide programs did not have an effect at all pod loss. Even though there was a trend of less pod loss in the better fungicide programs, it was not significant. At the 20 days, this one was, all three were significantly different from the 5 and 10 day here, but within the 20 day after digging here, the Miravis did do better than the latest program by itself, and numerically better than the chlorothalonil. Now, we were only able to do this in 1 year because 2020 we had a rain event that messed us up, and we couldn't use the data for that. So it didn't allow us to get back in the field and do what we needed to. So I want to rerun this program one more time, or this trial, to see if we get similar type results. But for the most part, the harvest date here seems to be more effects on the pod loss for the most part. In conclusion, we didn't have very much disease. The latest Miravis programs increase yield over tebuconazole for the most part. Yield was significantly reduced at the 10 and 20 days after harvest compared to the 5 days. LSK was not affected by harvest date, but it was by fungicide programs. The total sound mature kernels here had a fungicide effect, but not a harvest date effect. The one interesting thing was that the sound splits here was affected by the fungicide programs, and increased as harvest interval increased. So that was kind of interesting. And although pod loss was reduced with the latest Miravis in 2019, which is the only year we were able to do it, it seemed like the harvest date had more effect on that than the fungicide programs did. With that, I'm going to finish up and say I do appreciate your time. And again, anything we can try to bring to light to reduce the pod loss for our peanut growers, we need to look at least investigate and see if there's anything there that we can, bring to light for these growers. I do appreciate the support from Syngenta and the commodity commissions and the National Peanut Board for their efforts. With that, I'll take any questions if we have any.
Okay, thanks, Scott, for a great presentation.